All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So, today we are going to look at how life was for soldiers in the trenches and things like that during World War One. And at the end, we're going to talk about the Zimmerman telegram and what significance that brought about in World War One. Now, the thing is, before we move on, I'm going to tell you this right now because I was in class today. I went back. This is my I'll be there this week to teach you guys. Uh, but the thing is, I had I warned a lot of students before class started. Hey, you're gonna see some graphic stuff. You're gonna see some things that are gonna make you want to like, type of thing. Be prepared, okay? But this is legit stuff. This is stuff that they really don't mention in history books. But this is what soldiers went through. So when you watch some movie and or some documentary or whatever, and you're watching these things, this is the kind of stuff you like. Wait, no, they didn't have that. No, that's not right. This is the kind of things that people who truly love history and understand it pick off on TV shows and movies and go, yeah, no, they didn't do that. No, that's not legit. These people in real life back then, they went through this, they did this happened to them, or they had body parts that did this and that, they look like this. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So again, there are some images on here that kind of make you may want to. So if you have eaten recently, I would suggest you hold off from watching this video. Um, so, but if you are good to go, you think, hey, I'm tough enough, I can handle this. Hey, that's my student right there. So let's go ahead and talk about this stuff, okay? So, the objective today, we're going to analyze the life of soldiers, how it was in the trenches. We're going to examine the different diseases that soldiers got in the trenches and create an argument at the very end whether the U.S. would have joined the war if not for the Zimmerman telegram. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at your warm up picture. It's right there for you. So, here's my question. You look at these guys, right? They're in the trenches, front line, right? In your perspective, from your point of view, do these guys look prepared if there was a battle coming? The other side was coming at them, ready to attack and charge. To you, do these guys look ready, prepared for any type of battle, upcoming battle? And why do you say that? If you say yes, explain why. If you say no, explain why. So look at these guys, look what they're doing, see what's around them, and things like that. Um, and again, analyze the picture. Tell me what you think. Okay. And don't forget to put the why. Why do you believe this? Why do you say yes or no? Okay. So, all right. So pause the video, write your response because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right. So this is my type of history, the kind of nitty gritty, the disgusting thing of history. Because again, this stuff is true. This is legit things that people went through. Now, life in the trenches for the soldiers was best described as hell. Not just from historians who've read the stories or heard the stories, read journals and things like that. No, but also from the soldiers themselves. They basically, when people asked them, how was World War One? How was life in the trenches? They were like, it's hell. Okay. And you're going to see exactly what they mean. So, first off, let's go through the disgusting stuff first, like diseases. Dysentery. Now, if you don't know what dysentery is, it's basically like the best way I can explain it is like uncontrollable diarrhea. All right, it's just horrible. You're like puking your guts out. You're everything inside you. You can't hold anything down. You're completely dehydrated, and yeah, it's just horrible, horrible, horrible. How do people get it? Basically, drinking nasty water, which we will be talking about in a little bit. Okay. Cholera was another big one. Typhoid fever. Okay. These were common things and they spread quickly because, again, as you saw in that warm up picture, these guys were really close to each other. And back then, people didn't really know about covering their mouths when they coughed. So when people had fever, they'd be like, you know, if you go to Walmart, you know, especially before COVID, you would see that all the time. People just, coughing up all this nastiness, and you'd be like, cover your mouth. Now, especially after COVID, we know better. Cover your mouth if you're gonna cough up all this crap. Put you cough into your arm and things like that. You know, so we know better now, but back then they didn't. They just like coughed up a lung everywhere. Now, the top picture, that foot you see, that is like the beginning parts of trench foot. Okay. Now I know some of you guys are like, well, I remember when I was a kid, I used to take a bath and my fingers and my feet look like that, like all pruning. Okay, yeah. Okay, but here's the thing though. You don't get trench foot like that for just having your foot and feet and body in water for an hour or so. No. This is when the feet are constantly wet, hardly dried, and they're always around moisture. That's what happens to the foot, and it gets so bad that the tissue of the feet actually start to die, and it spreads all across the foot. And the only way to stop it from going higher up your leg and things like that is to basically chop it off. So, yeah. The next big one was called trench mouth, and that's what you see in the picture on the bottom there. Um, those white things you see, and let me move this video thing real quick. Move it up. So if you look at that white part at the bottom near the tooth, that's ulcers. And if you notice the gums, how it's kind of whitish, that's the inflammation of the teeth of the gums just coming out. So that mouth is very infected, and it's just, yeah, it just looks bad, right? Now the reason soldiers got this kind of stuff is like if they, let's say, were eating something and they cut their gums and then they were drinking some water that was not that great, it had some bacteria and things like that in it, it could cause some infection. Again, bad hygiene. They didn't brush their teeth. Um, and again, anything that really cut the gums and things like that, um, that could help increase the trench mouth. And yeah, if you really look at it, just nastiness, right? Bad. The other thing that happened during World War One was this thing called shell shock. Now, before World War One, if a soldier was kind of like shaking and like kind of scared, they were called a coward. You're not a man. You're hiding from war, things like that. Get up, you coward, things like that. But during World War One, we come to find out that no, it's not that this person was like being a coward or didn't want to fight. It's that they couldn't. It was a devastating mental illness that paralyzed these guys. Basically, their nerves are shot or they're on the very peak. So I know some people are like, "Oh, I get anxiety when there's a lot of people, things like that." That anxiety level you feel, times that by 1,000, because some of these guys saw their buddies next to them blown up right in front of them. They fall into a trench, or a bomb hole, and all of a sudden they see their buddy, crawling, trying to get out, and they're half gone, or might see some. They might trip and fall in and hit and fall inside a dead horse, or accidentally put their hands through a body that's been there for months, you know, that's been in the water and the rain, so it's all mushy and things like that, and that freaks them out, for good reason. So those guys experience a thing called shell shock. Nowadays, we call it PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. Okay. But that's what it was called back then, shell shock. And again, it's for good reason. And as some of you guys may or may not know, um, PTSD, it still goes on to this day for soldiers who've been in places like Iraq and Afghanistan and things like that. And it's not a joking matter. These guys really do suffer. You know, Now, the other thing that was kind of unique about World War One is this: believe it or not, since the beginning of war, way, way back in the days of the Macedonians and the Egyptians and the Romans and Greeks and all the way up until World War One. This is the first major conflict where more people died from fighting than diseases or starvation. Yeah, because the thing is, you have to remember, a lot of times these soldiers they would die from diseases, the flu and things like that. Because again, they're in camps and things like that. They're close together, so a lot of soldiers died through sickness, illnesses, and things like that. Some died of starvation. Not enough food, not enough water, things like that. But because World War One was so much more recent, it's been over 104 years, I believe, right now. 105 actually. Um, Medicine gotten better. We learned how to heal people better. We learned how to prevent stuff like trench foot, trench mouth, and things like that. It's just sometimes, hey, some soldiers didn't take care of their feet, didn't take care of their oral hygiene, didn't brush their teeth and things like that. But we had medication. We had ways to fix people, heal people, take bullets out without just chopping off their leg or arm. We knew how to do this now. And because of that, more soldiers recovered and got better than died from diseases and things like that. So, a little fun fact. Now, these two pictures are from two soldiers during World War One who are going through shell shock. From my understanding, the guy on the left, that was taken at like the exact moment he basically lost his mind. And that's why he looks like he's smiling. You know, he's not smiling because like, hey, it's a picture time, I'm gonna smile. No, he's lost it. His mind has just totally snapped, and he's basically just gone crazy. Hate to say it, but that's what happened. And the other picture is also a guy who too experienced shell shock. And from my understanding, they brought him back from the trenches, and you can see that stare, that look as some students did in class. It looked like he's just like looking like just he's out of it. And in some people, if from Vietnam, they would say they had the 1,000 yard stare. Like they can see way, way out there. They're not even looking right here. They're looking way out there. You know. So, all right. So, what did the day? How did the life in the trench? How was it like? Well, let's start it off. Standard day in the morning. First thing, sentry duty. Basically, soldiers had to get prepared at dawn because that was like the best time to attack. Right when the other side might be getting up, barely be waking up. Hey, we could sneak up and attack them. You know. So basically, the soldiers would get up, if they weren't already on patrol, and they would get either one or two commands. Number one, either stand to, which means, hey, get your guns ready, be prepared just in case the enemy is on their way over, or two, over the top, which meant get out of the trench and let's go attack the enemy. Okay. So those are one of the two orders they just listened for. Okay. Now, if there was a stand to order, hey, be prepared, things like that, then that's when the inspectors or the commanders will come by and inspect. It's called the kit and rifle inspection. Basically, these commanders would come around and make sure that the soldiers and their rifles were clean and ready to go. So, as you can see from the top picture, that commander guy is looking at these guys' feet, seeing, hey, are you changing your socks? Are you keeping your feet dry? Because we don't want anyone to have trench foot. Okay. And they would basically ask him if someone did, and they'd be like, why are you not changing your socks? What's going on here? You know, and that person could, some people try to get out of the fighting by trying to sabotage themselves by having trench foot and things like that. So, Okay. Then they would have a mealtime, typically be food and alcohol rations given. Now, yes, you read that right, and you heard me right. Alcohol was given. Now, I had some student ask me today, well, why didn't they give them water or something else to drink? Because here's the thing. Back then, they had refrigerators, but they didn't really just have them right there at the front lines. Um, so something like milk, no, you would have to get it from straight from a cow, and that's not pasteurized. That's not clean. You can get sick from that. Water, you couldn't unless it came from a waterfall or a creek that was away from the fighting and some of that. Then maybe you might get some clean water. But other than that, a lot of that water was dirty, and sometimes dead bodies were in that water. You know, like I explained in one class today, sometimes you might get like a little pond right here, and there was a fighting going on. There's some dead horses, some dead bodies in there, and then when the rains came and started raining, that rain brought up some more of that water up, and that water traveled, and it could have gone into some drinking water, and now it just flows into there, taking all that nastiness into that drinking water, and these soldiers drinking. And all of a sudden, now they're sick because now they're drinking all this, dead parts of people and that nastiness, so they can get sick. Okay, so but alcohol, it's a disinfectant. Okay, alcohol in a sense cleans. So that's why they gave it to him, and also kind of to give him liquid courage, kind of like, hey, we're gonna fight. Okay, well let me take a little drink and okay, I feel good, I feel better. Let's do this. Afternoon time came, just like you guys, they had chores. They had a job to do. Okay, so filling sandbags, repairing trenches, even digging new trenches. Hey, we have the line right here. Let's try to dig till we get closer to the other side, and maybe we can get them if we dig a trench and we go at this angle and things like that. They would pump out the flooded water, flooded sections. Try to get all that water out. So again, somebody who's standing there isn't standing in wet, their shoes all in water for all day. And then digging latrines. And if you don't know what latrines are, those are basically restrooms. They would dig a hole. Um, Sometimes they would put a bucket down there. Sometimes they wouldn't. If they didn't, then they would just basically, once that bucket was full of human waste, then they would put dirt on top of it and mark it, saying, "Hey, don't dig here. Don't step around here, because we buried the pee and poop there." Okay. Now, once they're done with the chores, okay, relaxation time. Okay, so if you're not on the post, if you're not keeping an eye, you're not on duty, you can relax. So some soldiers, they slept. Some wrote letters home. Some wrote poetry. Some were reading books and things like that. Some were playing cards, using cigarettes and food for as money and stuff like that. And some people were actually even making art, sketching, painting, things like that. And this is the God's honest truth, guys. Um, there wasn't battles every single day. All right. A lot of times it was a waiting game, see if the other side is moving, see if you see a head popping up, things like that. Um, and a lot of times those other guys would keep low and things like that. So people spent days just looking out in the horizon, seeing if they can spot some German or whoever popping their head up a little bit and they can take a shot at them. But boredom, that was a major thing. Um, that was a major problem that most soldiers faced in World War One. The boredom. What do we do? We're just waiting and things like that. And it's that can really drain morale in a soldier. All right, now evening time comes. Now this is a time where soldiers did dangerous thing under the cover of night. Again, a lot of these guys are bored. They want to do something, and now, hey, we need you guys to do certain things, such and such stuff. Okay, cool. So what a lot of soldiers did in the no man's land area, they would go out there and repair trenches. They would do night patrol, make sure they know. the other side isn't coming by, things like that. Some guys, believe it or not, actually spied on the enemies. They would crawl through the dirt and things like that, under trenches and around dead bodies, even climbing over them and things like that, dead horses and stuff. And they would spy on the other side. And then some people basically were just there to monitor and listen. Do you hear that? You hear that? You know, and just make sure that the other side wasn't coming on them or spying on them. Okay. Now, in the no man's land, night attacks did happen, but they weren't like all the time. It was pretty rare. Okay. Now, fighting happened in cities during the night times. Sure, absolutely. But in the trenches and the no man's land, mm, here and there, but not like all the time. Okay. Um, Again, some soldiers would keep watch. They'd be on patrol duty. They'd be sentry duty, watching, and while the rest of the guys slept. Okay. Now, here's the other nasty thing that happened too, which was pretty like dang. Rats would sometimes fall into the trenches. Now, I'm sure you're like, well, whoop whoop. What about these rats? Who cares? Thing is, these rats would be in the no man's land, and they would be eating dead soldiers, dead horses, you know, and these rats would get big. And when I mean big, I'm talking New York City rat size big. These guys were as big as large cats, weighing anywhere from 10 to 22 pounds. Imagine a rat weighing more than some dogs. And if you want an idea of how much like 22 pounds weighs, go to your grocery store and pick up a sack of potatoes. And that's around 20 to 30 pounds, depending on how big of a sack of potatoes it is. And imagine a rat on you, biting you, biting your face, your neck, your eyes, your ears, your nose, you know. Because the thing is, some of these rats, they would fall into the trenches when it rained. Or sometimes they'd be close to the edge and they're just looking for something else to eat because they're looking for, again, for blood. Because they ate dead bodies, they ate dead horses and people. So now they have a taste for blood. And when they fall in the trenches, they're scurrying around looking for something that looks dead. And what people, when they sleep, they tend to look like they're dead, huh? So that's what happened. Sometimes some soldier be sleeping, and all of a sudden a rat just crawls up and starts biting their face, biting their nose, their lips, their ears, their throat. So, and as you can see from this picture, this dog captured quite a bit of rats. You see again how big some of them can get. So, in the United States in 1916, President Wilson ran for re-election and he won. Basically, he was telling the American people, "I am the peace candidate. I haven't sent any soldiers to fight. Yes, I've sent, lent each side money. Yes, I sent food, but we have not sent any soldiers because this is not our war." And Americans were like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." Okay. Now, Germany, they kind of knew that the United States was favoring more Britain than them. So what happened was a German official named Arthur Zimmermann sent a telegram to the German ambassador in Mexico and told him, give this offer to the Mexican government. Now, this picture you see here, this is the actual Zimmermann telegram. As you see in the numbers and some of that, that's code. And the United States, we intercepted this coded message and we broke it. And we found out what the offer was that Germany was giving to Mexico. Basically, it said this: if the US joined the war and they were going against Germany, so if the United States joined and they're backing up England and France. Basically, Germany's telling Mexico, what we want you to do is join us, be on our side. And if you do that, we will help you gain the lost land from the US. Now, what lost land are they referring to? Well, you're going to find this out next year in US history, but during the uh, fight for Texas and the Mexican American War, the United States lost the state of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Colorado, parts of Oregon, um, parts of Idaho. We lost, United Mexico lost quite a bit of land to America. And that's what Germany is telling them. You help us, right? The US joins the war and you join with us, we will help you get all that land back. Now, here's the thing. Once word spread that Germany was making this offer to Mexico, this upset a lot of Americans. A lot of them. And Germany was like, well, you know what? Cat's out of the bag. They found out our plan. So on February 1st, 1917, they went back to unrestricted submarine warfare. Basically, again, we're going to start sinking ships without warning. Now, why did they do this? Mainly because they felt they were almost starving out Britain and France. Remember, Britain's an island. There's a lot of rock and things like that there. So for them to make a lot of food for not only their people but for the soldiers, that's asking a lot. And then also France, a lot of the country is basically war zone, so they're not really have much too much um, land to grow food. But the United States, they have plenty, and they're sinking all kinds of American ships that have equipment and food and things like that. And Germany was like, look it, we're almost starving out Britain and France. The United States, we keep sinking their ships and they're not fighting back. They're not going to join the war. What do we got to be scared about them for? Psh. Well, with that being done, President Wilson on April 2nd, 1917, calls a special session of Congress and asks them for a declaration of war against Germany. And he gets it. And once he Congress approves it and signs the declaration, the United States is now involved in World War One. All right, so here is my question to you. Okay, now there were times where food supply was really low, like I was telling you with Britain and France, things like that. So imagine you're one of those soldiers. You're in the trenches. You're starving, and then you get word that it's going to take days, maybe even a week, for the food you were supposed to have to come in. Okay, so not only are you now starving, but your food that you're supposed to be getting, it won't be here for another several days and maybe even a week. What would you do? Would you eat the rats? You know, the only thing that were available really were those rats because those rats were, again, coming in into the trenches and things like that. So would you eat them knowing that they ate dead bodies, that they ate dead horses, your own people, out there in the no man's land? They've been eating them up and things like that. Those bodies been stinking and rotting, and those rats are eating them. Would you eat the rats if you're one of those soldiers? Why or why not? And explain. Okay. And again, yes, this is something that some people had to experience in World War One. Okay. So once you answer this question, you're done with this lesson. All right. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully I didn't disgust you too much with this lesson. But again, this is the stuff that makes history interesting and makes it like, wow, appreciate it more. Okay. So, with that being said, you guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later. Okay.